Okay, let's talk about building forms for which you need to enter information that may be time sensitive, such as blood glucose curves, or forms where you need to make multiple data entries, such as anesthetic monitoring forms. So what I have pulled up here is just an example of one that I built basically for this video. The numbers are completely created from the top of my head, so don't take those to heart. And also, I apologize if I have to talk kind of fast. I do only have 15 minutes to explain this, and I want to make sure that we cover all the steps. So again, this is just an example. Feel free to mix it up and add your own things in, and it's completely customizable. But I am going to use this particular form as an example, and we're going to build it together. One thing I just want to point out real quick is that we are actually going to be building this section of the form first, which it's this little table inside the form itself. So this does need to come first. We do need to build this first before we build anything else. And this is just an example of a blood glucose form. Again, it's got this little table that's set inside of it, and if you're building a blood glucose curve table, you have to create that table first before you create the rest of the form. I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. First things first, we're going to go to Work With, System Tables. And under System Tables, you should have an entry called Additional Data Tables. If you do not have this entry, you need to call AVImark Technical Support, and they will walk you through on how to add it in. On this side, yours is probably going to be blank if you have not created a form yet of any kind or a table of any kind. That's fine. I obviously have, so mine are already entered there. But just right click and click New, and this little green window here should pop up, and you're just going to give your new table a code, doesn't matter what, and then a description, and just make sure that you give it a real description so that we can tell these tables apart as you create more tables. I just don't recommend labeling them Table 1, Table 2, Table 3. So after you do that, we're going to click OK, and then we're going to right click on the table that we want to create, and we're going to click on More Stuff fields. Now I've highlighted blood glucose here, but we're really going to be working on anesthetic vitals. Hopefully you are too. Alright, once you do that, this little green window should pop up. And you can see I've already got mine listed out here because I've already created this table, but yours is probably going to be blank, but that's fine. We're going to enter it in. So the first thing that we're going to do, and you should do this on any table that is time sensitive, is make the entry time. So we're just going to right click down in here and click New, and this little green window should pop up. So we're going to give it a description title. We're going to call it Time. And under Type, we're going to choose Time. Under Default, you can either leave this blank if you want to manually enter in the time. For instance, if you're not going to be entering this information until later in the day, you probably don't want to use current time. But if you do have computers in your surgery suite or close by to where your staff member or technician is entering this information in as it happens, then you can use the default current time, and that will take whatever time is currently on your computer clock and enter it in for you. So after you get that done, you're just going to keep either right clicking and hitting New, or if this window repopulates for you, we're just going to keep adding in all the vitals that we want to monitor or be on our form to monitor. So you see there's a couple different types here. Phrase. Now the reason I used phrase for my blood pressure is so that it'll support that / that separates my systolic from my diastolic. If you use integer, which is just a solid number, it won't do that. So for my blood pressure, your type should be phrase. For your respiration, your heart rate, your SpO2, and your TCO2, you can all use integers for that, so long as you're not using decimals or percentage signs or anything else. Hopefully you're not. Shouldn't be. Temperature, I do have listed as a decimal because we do obviously use decimals. 100.1, 101.5, and so on. So once we get everything entered in of all the vitals that we want to monitor, we now need to decide where we want this form to be available to us at. Normally you would put it on some sort of an anesthesia code or a treatment item. If you have an actual code for anesthetic monitoring, maybe at a zero charge, which we actually do, I'm just using this code as an example, that would be a great place to put it. If you have a general surgery code, you could put it on there. It doesn't matter, it's up to you. So decide where you want this. Go into your treatment list and pull up that treatment item, usually by double-clicking on it or right-clicking and hitting change. And it should open up this orange window, tan window, and then down here we're going to click on more stuff. Now before we go any further, word of advice. Make sure that you've got everything that you want already written down somewhere on a piece of paper, or you know in your mind how you want this form to look like. Creating the form isn't that difficult. However, if you want to change or rearrange the order of these fields, or how this is all set out, it can be a little time consuming because you can't just swap these two here or bring this one down here. You actually have to delete all of this and then re-enter your information. So sit down with your staff or technicians or whoever is going to be entering in all this information and decide how you want this form to look, how you want it to be. If you want it to go in order, in a certain order, definitely make sure that you've got that all planned out ahead of time. So here is just mine. I've got my technician or my user first. I want to know when the animal first went under anesthesia, and then I want to know what time the actual surgery started. Obviously these are going to be two different numbers. And then I've got that anesthetic vitals table that we created. I want that to come after surgery has started. If you start monitoring your animal as soon as anesthesia starts, then maybe you want this surgery time underneath the table. So, keep that in mind. After the table, I've got my surgery ending time, my anesthetic ending time. Sometimes they're not always the same. My time extubated, and if there's anything important that I want to make notes about the animal's recovery. Okay, so once we've decided where we want this form to generate at, remember we used that anesthesia code description treatment item, and we clicked on more stuff. This window's going to generate, and you can see here this is the list which I have created that I want everything to be in order of for my anesthetic monitoring form. So by right-clicking and hitting new, this little green window is going to pop up just like before. Under description I wrote technician, which I'm then going to select user for, and under my default it'll say current user. Now this here is just a list of all your different possibilities. If you wanted to get a little bit more creative, you can have check boxes, you can have yes or no boxes, you can have ranges. There's lots of different things that you can play with on here and totally customize this entire form. After my technician, I had my anesthetic start time. Under type, I use time. And for default, I use current time. Again, you don't have to use current time. You can leave this blank and enter in the time manually, which, under something like this, I would recommend. Okay, so once I got in those entries there, I wanted to put in the anesthetic vital table. So after my surgery start time, I entered in my anesthetic vitals. Under type, I chose table. And then it'll give you an option down here. It says choose from. And you're going to choose that anesthetic vitals table that we created earlier. And then hit done. And then just finish entering in the rest of the things that you want to see on your form. Under recovery, I entered the type as phrase, and you can see I had that default there as uneventful. That's the most common thing that we write under recovery, and so if you have a default, it will automatically generate on every single form. So if it is not an uneventful recovery, you will have to manually change that, or you can just leave your default blank and enter it in every single time. Alright, so after we've entered in everything, hopefully this is what your form is going to be looking like. If you did it the same way that I did it, it should. So now we just need to know, how are we going to use this? Where does it come from? Where does it go? And how do we get information entered in? So remember, we used this code here that we linked the form to, this anesthesia treatment item. And so I entered that into the medical history, and then I just simply come over here and click on more stuff. Now you can see that this more stuff has already been checked and is red because I already have this form filled out for you ahead of time. However, in the future, if there is no form listed onto it, it will look just like the rest of these. So once you click on more stuff, our anesthetic form is going to pop up right there for us. Now I'm logged in, so my name is automatically going to generate under technician. And then I'm just going to simply enter in all this information. Now with these particular boxes, I can simply just click and start typing in, and just tab to the next field if I want, click and type my information in. Once I get to my vitals table here, I actually need to right click and hit new. And another little window will pop up where I can enter in all that information. Now remember, I chose to use the current time. So my time is going to be whatever is currently on my computer clock, and that's going to be entered in automatically for me. So I can just tab to the next field. So my blood pressure, now see how this field is a little bit longer. Remember I said we had to use the phrase type instead of using the integers or the decimal type. So I can just enter in my blood pressure here and continue on with the rest of my vitals and hit OK, and it'll make an entry. Then it'll look just like this. So I've made 4 entries here, all at different times with different results. Everything looks nice and neat. I went ahead, let's just say that my surgery procedure went well, everything is over with, so I'd entered in all my information down there. Recovery, I just made a little note that said the patient was very vocal, otherwise uneventful. Remember, we usually have that default uneventful, so I did have to change that. So what happens after this? Where does it go? So after you have everything entered in and you hit OK, that field is basically going to disappear, and it's going to go back to looking like this. But when you right click up here under the patient's name and hit chart, this is how it's going to be portrayed on your patient chart here. Obviously this is only half of my chart, just so you guys could see it. But I did make a little note under here, and this is standard. It's in my glossary, so every time that we make this entry, it'll say, maintain on isoflurane and oxygen, and then underneath it says see anesthetic monitor field for values. And then down here, wherever that anesthesia code gets listed, all this information is going to be listed, and it's going to look very, very similar to this. Obviously I changed my technician name to Jane Doe, but that doesn't really matter. I did that myself. The computer did not do that. And then all my vitals are going to be listed here with all that other information. It's nice, it's neat, it's all packaged together, it's easy to read, it's organized, and it just goes along with the whole being digital, paperless practice. You really can't beat this. If you have technicians that are super quick with their keyboard, this literally takes minutes to enter, if even that. So, depending on how long your procedure is and how often you do your anesthetic monitoring vitals. So hopefully this has explained things for you. I apologize again if I went a little quickly. I am running out of time. So by all means, feel free to comment or email me if you have any questions. And good luck.